to the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
Is that verse talking about salvation?
Yes.
How? What is the lady asking
Because
for?
Jesus Christ is salvation.
What is the lady asking for?
She's asking for a growth.
Healing.
She's asking for healing. Is she asking for salvation? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, so that verse is not about salvation. When you go to the, when you go,
No.
hold on.
8-1.
Let me finish. So when you go to the other perspective, when you go to Mark's Gospel, chapter 7, verse 27, he says, but the woman, I'll start at verse 26, right? It says, but the woman was a Greek Syrophoenician by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. That was a healing. But Jesus said unto her, let the children be fed first. Who are the children?
Okay, so if we keep reading, let's keep reading though. The children are Israelites.
Thank you. Israelites. The children are the Israelites. So it says right here, let the children be fed first. So since the children are fed first, it is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it unto the dogs.
No.
So they're never going to get the bread.
It says first. So if Israel's first,
No. Here's the thing. That's what he's saying.
Who's second?
Right.
What you got? 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so here's the thing, brother. You're saying that he's saying
The Bible saying.
brother, no. Because you're assuming that the Gentiles are going to come second. When he literally just said in the latter part of the verse, it is not mean to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. So it can't be talking about no, brother. Listen, Brian, listen. Read that verse. Read that verse.
If the bread's not supposed to be to them, why did he go ahead and heal her? Why did he go ahead and heal her daughter?
This is a book of Mark, chapter 7, verse 26. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation. Verse 27. But Jesus said unto her, let the children first be filled.
Meaning, hey, guess what? Let the children first be filled. Wait your turn for you to get a crumb. That's what he's saying. He's not saying, I'm going to give you the whole loaf. That's what he's saying.
Why did he keep it saying? Jesus said this. Then he told us, because of this reply, you
For it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it unto
It's
dogs.
not good to give you the
Greek there means
bread and pass it on a damn dog. That's what he said.
And she answered and said unto him, yes, Lord.
She said,
Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord.
goddamn dog.
That's right.
Let the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs.
She still get the crumbs. So that's what she does.
So wait.
No, she got a healing. Her daughter was just, why did he heal her daughter? Listen, heal her daughter. Listen, have a demon.
Listen. Buddy made a fatal mistake. He said that this is for salvation. Now, if she got a crumb, then she's part of that salvation. Because Israel is, she said, let the children be fed first.
Shalom. I want to give all honors and glories and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Wakakodash, Yahweh, which is the one true name of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one true name is Yahweh Shai. Bahashem, meaning coming in the name. Ba means coming in. Ha means the. Sham means name. Rakah means spirit. Kodash means holy. Double honors to the elders and the apostles and bishops of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I've learned this truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Shai. Peace, blessings, salutations to the hopeful elect, and shalom to you sincere brothers that are scattered abroad. Picture forth this word in truth and sincerity. I am the brother Mashiach Razakah, and pretty much in this lesson it's going to be titled as the Greek / Syrophoenician Salakia woman was an Israelite. Okay, the Greek / Syrophoenician woman was an Israelite. Okay, and we're going to prove that in this lesson. Now, you had this wacky-tacky, Christian group pull up to an Israelite camp, and they're using Mark 7 and 26, right, where it mentions the Greek / Syrophoenician woman, right, because of that statement there of her being Greek, titled as Greek Syrophoenician. They believed that she was a natural heathen. And because our Lord Yahweh Shai healed her daughter that was possessed with a demon, they're interpreting that since she was a heathen, that she's granted salvation. Where they fail to realize that Greek Syrophoenician woman that's mentioned in Mark 7 and 26, she was an Israelite. Okay, and we're gonna prove that in this lesson. So, for you brothers out there that's new and you out there teaching, you got to be aware, because these Christians are coming to the camps and they're using how you say it? A whole lot of different scriptures that they don't understand, which you should understand. You should be able to understand. So you got to be aware, again, Isaiah 49:6, they'll use Isaiah 49:6, they'll use Galatians 3 and 20 Galatians 3:28 through 20 Galatians 3:28 through 29, Galatians 3:7 and 8. They'll use what's that, Revelation, Romans, like at Romans 1:16. So they'll use these type of scriptures, and you got to be able to understand, when it comes to that Greek or Gentile, or they'll see Greek there or Syrophoenician, that they literally interpret that's talking about a natural heathen being given of that salvation. So we're going to go into this, and you just got to be careful, man. It's good to go into these scriptures. So we're going to go into this. I do have my notes here, so Lord willing, this lesson is edifying. And this is we're going to start at Mark 7:25. Okay, he started at 26, but we're going to start at verse 25. Okay, it says, and Lord willing, this lesson is edifying. Okay, this is Mark 7:25. It says, for a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell at his feet. Verse 26. And it says the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician. Okay, so it says the woman was a Greek and Syrophoenician. All right, now right here, we understand and know here with the correct understanding that the woman was neither an Edomite woman nor was she a Canaanite woman, but she was an Israelite. So the moment we see this here, we know that she was an Israelite. She wasn't a heathen. She wasn't an Edomite. She wasn't a Canaanite. She wasn't a heathen. She was an Israelite. Okay, but let's continue. All right, we're going to finish this whole thing. Verse 26, it says, the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation. And it says, and she bought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. Verse 27. And it says, but Yahushua said unto her, let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it onto the dogs. Okay. And Yahushua is talking about Israel here. That's who he's talking about. Okay. And then the dogs, that's referring to the other nations. Okay. The dogs are referring to the heathen nations. Okay. The heathens. Okay. Because it's all about Israel. We know that the scriptures don't contradict themselves. All right. Like the scriptures for a precept. The scriptures say and actually, I wasn't thinking of getting this, but I'll get it right now. Now, we understand and know that the scriptures don't contradict themselves. And I should have got this as a backup precept. So this is how we know that the Lord is only dealing with Israel. Okay. Now read this. This is 2 Esdras 6:54. This is to back up to prove what I just said. Because I said that the dogs are the other nations, right? The dogs are referring to the heathen, right? And it's all about Israel. We know that the scriptures don't contradict themselves, right? And this is how we know the scriptures don't contradict themselves. This is 2 Esdras 6:54. And it says, and after these, Adam also, whom thou madest Lord, right, of all thy creatures, it says, of him come we all, and the people also whom thou hast chosen, right? Which that chosen there is Israel. Verse 55, and it says, all this have I spoken before thee, O Lord, because thou madest the world for our sakes. Verse 56, and it says, as for the other people, the other nations, the ones that are considered dogs, right? Those are the other nations, the other people, the 17 heathen nations, the natural Gentiles, right? It says, as for the other people, which also come of Adam, because we all do come from Adam, right? It says, thou hast said that they are nothing. So they are nothing. Those are the dogs. That's when the scriptures mention about the dogs there. All right. The dogs are the other nations. All right. The dogs are referring to the heathens. Okay. Those are the other people, right? It says they are nothing, right? But like unto spittle, they're spit. So if you spit on the ground, you're not going to pick that back up, right? So we know that the Lord is not dealing with the other nations. It says, and has likened the abundance of them unto the drop that falleth from a vessel. And there you go. So we know and understand that when we read in Mark 7:27, and it says, and to cast it onto dogs, the Lord is talking about the other nations. Okay, the dogs are referring to the heathens, the natural heathens. All right, so it's all about Israel. We know that. All right, the scriptures don't contradict themselves. It doesn't contradict itself. We just read in 2nd Esdras 6:54 to 56. So the Lord is not dealing with these other nations. They're spittle. Okay. Let's continue. Verse 28. And it says, and she answered and said unto him, Yes, Lord, yet the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. Verse 29. Right? And it says, and when it says like it, verse 29, and it says, and he said unto her, For this saying, go thy way, the devil is gone out of thy daughter. So eventually the Lord healed the woman's daughter, right? And we know that the Lord is only dealing with the Israelites, right? That woman was an Israelite. And we're going to prove that. We're going to go back to this in a minute. But we're going to get that in Mark 16 and 1. Okay? This is Mark 16 and 1. And it says, then came he, right? And we know that the he is talking about Apostle Paul, right? When he was on his journey, right? When he was doing his journey, right? And it says, then came he to Derbe and Lystra. All right. Now, Derbe and Lystra was a place up there in Asia Minor, okay, which at that time was ruled by the Romans. All right. And we know that Timotheus, he was an Israelite, because this is what it's going into, but let's get to it. It says, then came he to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timotheus. All right. And we know that, Timotheus was an Israelite, but his father didn't believe, so therefore, the scriptures, it called him a Greek, right? So when you look at the word, Greek, which we're going to get in a little bit, it says, so the son of a certain woman, which was a Jewish, right, and believed, but his father was a Greek, all right? And we knew that his father, he was an Israelite, but he didn't believe. All right, he didn't believe, therefore, like the scriptures called him a Greek. So when you go into the word Greek there, right, which we're going to get right here in this scripture, because Timotheus was an Israelite, but his father, he didn't believe, right? So the scriptures called him a Greek, right? So when you go to the meaning of that word Greek there, it goes into G1672, which is Helen, right? And it says a Greek either by nationality, whether a native of the mainland or the Greek islands or colonies. Okay? See, or colonies. And that's what, Timotheus' father was. He was a native of one of the Greek islands of the colonies. Okay? He was up there in Derbe and Lystra, right? So, Timotheus' father, he wasn't circumcised, all right? He was of the uncircumcised Israelites. He was a Israelite foreigner, okay? So, let's read this again. So we're going to read this again. It says, then he to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple was there named Timotheus. It says the son of a centurion woman, right? It says which was a Jewish, right? That was Jewish. It says and believed, but his father was a Greek. All right. So getting back to that woman, right? We're gonna go to Mark 7 and now the Greek word for Greek there in what was that we went into? It was Acts 16 and 1. It was Hellenin. Now when you go into let me see if you get it. For the word Greek there is Hellenis, right? And this is a woman's form of Greek, okay? So it's Helen. It goes into Hellenis, all right? So the woman, she was a Greek Syrophoenician, all right? And the reason why she was called a Syrophoenician was because what? Because she was a part of the native or inhabitant of the of Phoenicia, all right? When it was a part of the Roman province. And I'm going to prove that right now, okay? You see? And Salakia, I'm doing it like this, but I should have had an extra window. So when you look up the meaning for the Greek Syrophoenician, right? It says a native or inhabitant of Phoenicia when it was part of the Roman province, a province of Syria. You see that? So she was an Israelite. So this lady, she was an Israelite, right? She was an Israelite woman who took up the Greek ways, all right, who took up the Greek customs. She also was an inhabitant of Phoenicia, all right, when it was a part of the Roman province in Syria. You see that? So she was an Israelite. She just had the customs of the Greeks, all right, of the Edomites, which were the Greeks and the Romans. Okay, she was an Israelite, but she had the ways of the heathen. She had the ways of the heathen. She was a Hellenist, which was an Israelite of the flesh, but had the customs and the ways of the Greeks. Okay, so she was an Israelite foreigner. She was an Israelite. Okay, so now going back to this, Salakia. Going back to this, let's read again. It says the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation, and she bought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. You see, reading down, and it says, but Yahushua said unto her, let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it unto the dogs. All right, we broke that down already. Verse 28, and she answered and said unto him, yes, Lord, yet the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. Verse 29, and he said unto her, for this saying, go thy way, the devil is gone out by thy daughter. Okay, so we're reading here, right? And it's mentioned about the Lord, right? It says, the Lord healing her daughter. So by Yahweh Shai healing the daughter, that goes to show you that she was an Israelite woman, man. That shows that there. Okay. So by the Lord healing her daughter, casting that possessed demon off of her daughter, that proves that she was an Israelite. All right. She wasn't an Edomite. She wasn't a Canaanite. All right. She took up the Edomite customs at that time. Right. And at that time, they were called Greeks because she took up those customs. She took on the ways of the Greeks. She took on the ways of the heathen. So you had Israelites again. They were speaking Greek, dressing Greek. They were in the ways of the Greeks. So by reading the definition there, right, which we were just reading, it says a native or inhabitant of Phoenicia when it was part of the Roman province of Syria. So when you put those two together, right, Greek and Syrophoenicia, right, when you put Syria and Phoenicia together, it makes the word Syrophoenicia, Syrophoenician. Okay, so when you put those two words together, Syria and Phoenicia, right, it makes the word Syrophoenicia. Okay, so we went into the Greek, which the Greek word it says Hellenis, right? Because that's a female, that's referring to a female. But when you go into the Greek and it says Hellenin, that's referring to the Israelite man that's Hellenized. Okay, so that word Greek there goes into the Greek word of Hellenin, right? Which goes to the word Hellenist with a T. But when you see Hellenist, that's referring to the woman, because she was an Israelite that took on the ways of the Greeks. Okay. All right. So again, at that time, she took on the ways of the customs of the Greeks. Okay. So there you go, man. So she pretty much, was a native, who was, of the inhabitants of Phoenicia. And at that time, it was part of the province of Syria, right? So there you go. So we're going to read that. We're going to go back again. And we're going to sum all this up. And actually, we're going to go into the meaning of that word, Syrophoenicia, right? Which I got the meaning for Greek.
Strong's G 4949 Syrophoenikisa. Syrophoenikisa.
Right? So this is the Greek word of Syrophoenician, which is Syrophoenikisa, right? Which is, it says exalted palm. It says the name of a mixed nation, half Phoenicians and half Syrians. All right. And I got the definition for it. See, it says right there, female native of Phoenicia, and Syria. So she wasn't a heathen. She was an Israelite, right? And she was a native because she was in the habitant of that land. She was in the habitant of Phoenicia, okay, when it was a part of the Roman province of Syria. So she was an Israelite, okay? She was an Israelite. She was not a heathen. So again, she was not an Edomite. She was not a Canaanite. She was an Israelite. And for an example, and we say this all the time, we're Israelites of the flesh, right? We know we're Israelites, but we're in a place called what? We're in a country called what? America. So we're titled as what? African American, Native American, and Hispanic American, right? And we know that our nationality is not Americans. Okay, we just live in inhabitants of America, the land of which is called America, which that's not even the actual name of the land, but it was changed to America, right? Now, in this society, in this country that we live in, we're called Americans, right? Again, African American, Native American, Hispanic American. But that's not our nationality. We're just called that. But our nationality is what? Israelites. So even though we live in this inhabitant of this land, of this country, we're called African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Native Americans. That's not our nationality. We're Israelites, right? So it's the same thing with Mark 7 and 26 on down to 29. Okay, the Lord healed that woman's daughter, right? To, heal her of that possession of that demon, of that devil, right? Because she was an Israelite. But he's interpreting that she was a heathen because he reads he reads Mark 7 and 26 where it says the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician, which we just went into the definition of that. Okay. And she was called the reason why she was called a Syrophoenician, a Greek Syrophoenician, because she was a native or inhabitant of Phoenicia when it was a part of the Roman province of Syria. So she lived there, okay? She was an inhabitant there. That's why she was called a Greek Syrophoenician. It wasn't because she was a natural heathen. So again, man, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. And this is why, again, Salakia. And this is why, again, you got to be careful when you're dealing with these Christians when you're out there teaching. You got to understand the scriptures. So again, he used Mark 7 and 26 to justify that heathens can receive salvation, where he was clearly wrong. Okay, he was clearly wrong there. Okay, he was clearly wrong. Even though that woman was, it says in the scriptures in Mark 7 and 26, she was called a Greek Syrophoenician because what? Because she was a native or an inhabitant of the land of Phoenicia, which was in the province of the Romans of Syria. Okay, so she lived in that area and she took on the customs of the ways of the Greeks. So she was an Israelite foreigner, but she just took on the way of the Gentile state. She was in a Gentile state of mind. She took on the ways of the Greeks, of the heathen. So she was an Israelite of the flesh, but she was an Israelite foreigner. So that's why the Lord healed her daughter. It had nothing to do with her being a natural heathen. So again, that Greek Syrophoenician, that wasn't meaning that she was a heathen. Okay, that was meaning that she was a native or inhabitant of Phoenicia when it was a part of the Roman province of Syria. So that lady was an Israelite. She was not a heathen. So, hey, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all honors and glories and praises to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, Bahashim HaKakodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles and bishops of Great Millstone who will well and teach well, because those are the men who I learned this truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai. Peace, blessings, salutations to the hopeful elect. And shalom to you, sincere brothers that are scattered abroad, pushing forth this word in truth and sincerity. And shalom to you, sincere sisters that are listening to signs as the scriptures command you to do so. I am the brother Mashiach Razakah, and Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. On to the next one. Shalom.